thanks everybody for coming to our second lunchtime presentation of the year. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. So if you have come to all of the Whitlow presentations so far, you've already got 4 hours of MCLE in the bank for this year, including 3 hours of professional responsibility credits from the Lincoln birthday presentation that we put on. But even if you haven't been able to be here personally, you can still get credit by watching those videos online. So you have gotten emails from Whitlow about how to view the videos online and how to download the certificate. We're still having some issues with the downloading of the certificate, so if you have a problem with that, or I should say some of us are still having an issue with downloading the certificate. If you have a problem with that when you watch it online, just contact me and I'll forward your request on to the right people at Whitlow. We can help you figure out how to do that so get you a certificate. The other couple of issues I wanted to bring up is that beginning on July 1, the MCLE board has changed the rules about how Whitlow reports the people who are in attendance at these programs. So just keep in mind that in the next few months, we're going to have to change how the sign-in process works, because we're actually going to have to report, Whitlow is going to have to report whether you attended these programs, and there's going to be some kind of grid on the MCLE board website where Whitlow is going to actually have to put in your name and your ARDC number certifying that you attended this particular program. So that's coming up in the next few months, so just kind of bear with us and be ready for that. The last announcement is, as I've been announcing it the last few of these things, we're going to try and go into a paperless mode here with our presentations. So within a few days of each one of these programs, you're going to be getting an email from Whitlow that asks you to download or print your own set of written materials so that you won't have to bring so many sets to the program, and we're going to kind of wean you off of that so that by the end of the year there's not going to be any paper materials here other than the certificates and the course evaluation. So please try as much as you can to get with the program and get with us about going paperless. And if there's any problem with that particular aspect of it, please reach my attention. Okay? So I think those are the announcements that I wanted to make about the MCLE programs. I don't see, is Jim Hardy here? Jim, are you here? Okay, so everybody knows that Jim is our president of Whitlow for this year, so I just wanted to see if he was here to make any additional Whitlow announcements, but that'll have to wait until next time, I suppose. So, what we're here today to talk about is the law of parking lot cases. So, if you remember, either watching the program last month or actually being here on that frigidly cold day last month on January 31st, when we did this, we talked about the Sheriff Smith case, which happens to be a parking lot case. And when we were talking about the Sheriff Smith case, I mentioned that I had seen John Walker of Woodruff, Johnson, and Evans do a really great presentation on the parking lot cases at an ITLA program that I attended last year. And John was in the audience, and people, he waved his hand, and people saw who John was. But after that program, I was flooded by questions from our members about how do I get in touch with John Walker? Where do I get John Walker's materials? We really want to know about this. So I did even better than that. I got John Walker to come here and do this personally for you. So John's going to talk to us about the parking lot cases, and he takes a historical perspective. I mean, he starts from like the horse and buggy days with the parking lot cases and takes us all the way up to the Sheriff Smith case, which was decided in 2019. So here's John to talk with us about parking lot. Thank you.
afternoon, everyone. Everyone hear me in the back? There's a yes. During my presentation, if there's any questions, you have to really raise your hand. I didn't wear my glasses today, so we're all actually just at work, kind of on purpose, but I can't see you individually. So they were talking about parking lot cases. I just looked at my presentation and stuff. Is it the law of parking lot cases or the laws of parking lot cases? But that's how and the anxiety that I live with, questioning myself every second of it. So these are cases we see a lot because of the climate in Illinois and Chicago. And there is more misinformation and misunderstanding of these parking lot cases than there should be, because the case law is relatively clear. And I'm going to start by telling you what the law is before we even go through the cases. It's sort of like, Pulp Fiction. We'll start at the end, tell you what's going to happen at the end of the movie, and then we'll watch the movie together. But parking lot cases, an employer provides parking for their employees. Those cases, and the employee is injured in the parking lot. Shortly before or when they're leaving work, there's a small window. Those cases are compensable. And they're compensable for two reasons. The first is because the employer provides the parking. And we'll get to Larson a little bit later, but what Larson says is, if you provide parking, this is an extension of the employer's premises. I don't see employer-provided parking as a perk or some type of benevolent act by the employer. Very often when employers provide parking, it's for the smooth operation of their business. If you think about one of the cases we'll talk about is the Caterpillar case about 20 years ago. Caterpillar plants are going to have between 500 and 3,000 people working up to 3 shifts, sometimes they're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you have 1,000 people coming in at 7 o'clock in the morning, they need somewhere to park. You can't really put 700, 900 number of people parking on the streets of Peoria or Montgomery or Decatur. So they have to provide parking for the smooth operation of their business. Also, a lot of these, you'll see, particularly with the older cases, the factory cases, and the economy's changed. The early cases were primarily involving industrial plants. These are, you're not going to find industrial plants in downtown Chicago. They're out of the way. They need to have rail access. So, for the same reason, you need to have parking, because you can't have your employees walking 2 miles and parking on a residential street or a rural street and walking 2 miles to get to the plant. And then there's, as I said, there's 2 theories under which an employee is covered for workers' compensation benefits for an injury in an employer's parking lot. The first is simply it happens in the parking lot and there's a hazard. When we get to the end, we'll see that apparently water is not a hazard, but ice and snow is a hazard. And there's some cases I didn't cite where there was an issue with gravel or oil in the parking lot. Those are compensable. And in the Caterpillar case, where it's just a curb and there's nothing wrong with it, so that's not compensable. The second one, which I think has led to the confusion, is this idea that the employee is at a greater risk than the general public. But it's not and, so the employee doesn't have to be on an employer's parking lot and be at a greater risk. It's an or at least it was an or until Sheriff Smith's decision, which they took something that was said in the Morris Harvey decision, took a little bit further, and they're now saying that once there's a hazard, you don't even have to do the greater risk analysis. But I think that's the biggest confusion, is that we often start looking, well, is this employee at greater risk than the general public? It generally doesn't matter if they're on an employer providing parking lot. When I sat in on the oral arguments of the Sheriff Smith case. The defense attorney, I don't know if Mr. Jesse's or Peter Jesse, the argument from Russ's office, did a great job. When he asked the appellate court, and it was the same question that last month when Dave was presenting, somebody in the back, I didn't see who it was, also asked, and said, why are employers responsible if their employee falls in the parking lot? It's not during work time. If it's icy and snowy in the employer parking lot, it's probably icy and snowy, and it's the same hazard 10 feet further once you are on a public street. And there's two answers to that question. The first answer is the snarky one, and that's that because the Illinois Supreme Court said so in 1962, and we've 900 years of Anglo-American legal tradition, it leads us to the common law and courts and judges make law and follow that law. But the better answer is the one that I already gave you, and that's Larson's explanation that the employer controls that parking lot, so it's an extension of their premises. The employer has the ability to make that parking lot safer. Employees at Walmart or Caterpillar or anywhere else can't really go on their own initiative and make private property of their employer's property safer. So that's the general reason when people ask, and it was asked to be appellate court justice, and they didn't give the answer. So I'm going to give, I give the answer, and that is that because it is an extension of the employer's property. So the first case is De Hoyos, and this goes back to 1962, and as you'll see, I used the name of the petitioner and the name of the respondent because of the people and user companies. I think that they matter, they're not just entities. So Mr. De Hoyos parks in St. Charles. At some point, there was a company called Moline Malleable Iron, which is long gone, and I think they made ball bearings. And he's in the parking lot, and he slipped and he injures his knee. It's a case that we see all the time. But this was the first one that the Illinois Supreme Court addressed. And Moline Malleable Iron was represented by Art Kane, who was the 8th president of the WCLA. It was like the 1950s. I didn't know the WCLA went back that far, but apparently he did. So he makes a very good argument. The employee's not on company property. He's in the parking lot. He's not in the plant. The fall was caused by the element. There is nothing about the employer that is causing the employer to put ice out there. So it's nothing to expect with the employer. There's no connection to the employer. And the Supreme Court rejected that argument. And there was also another element of this case where there was some dispute as to who owned the property that Mr. De Hoyos said that the employer owned the property. The employer didn't offer evidence to the contrary, but Art Kane cross-examined Mr. De Hoyos and his result and said, I don't know, I didn't pull the county records, I don't know exactly who owns it. But the Supreme Court said it doesn't matter. So whether or not the employer owns the parking lot is immaterial. If the employer provides parking, which is customarily used by its employees, the employer is responsible for the maintenance and control of the parking lot. And I've also seen that maintenance and control, I think, taken out of context. So I've seen, one time I was sitting in oral arguments, and the defense attorney was arguing, well, we don't actually maintain it. No one's going out there and salting and maintaining the lot. I don't think that's a defense if you're not, you're creating an unsafe condition, or you're not alleviating snow or ice to get you out of liability. I don't think that would be accepted by any court. But this is the beginning. De Hoyos is saying it's customarily used by the employees. You'll see that language is not specifically used again, but that theme is used again, where it really does have to be a lot that the employees are using. And the employer has, they're responsible for the maintenance and control. And this case was quite some time, it was 59 years ago. I think that there has been a shift in commission and their culture, I think. But at that time, I don't think there was any doubt that what the court was saying is the employer is responsible for the maintenance of their lot. So you can't have an unsafe lot. This is your lot, you're responsible for it. Interestingly, they also addressed this increased risk. The test, where we have the two-part test, actually comes later in the case that I don't cite, because it's not a parking lot case, it's the Illinois Telephone Bell Company case from 1989. But they do address increased risk, and they say that when you're in the parking lot, when an employee's in an employer parking lot, he or she is exposed to hazards to which the general public is not exposed. And we'll see this language actually becomes more important later on. It's also a source of confusion. But I think the reading of De Hoyos, the full case, will tell us even back then you didn't need the increased risk, especially enough if you were an employer parking lot. Second case, also from the Supreme Court, was 4 years later in Axons of Illinois. And this case involves a beauty shop, which is on the second floor of the C. Lewis department store in Champaign. So, you know, I think they probably have something like that at Macy's. I know there's a restaurant in Neiman Marcus, but this is sort of a throwback to a different time where it wouldn't be uncommon to have restaurants and beauty shops and other stores within a department store. And the petitioner in this case, Elma Goose, it's a rainy day, and she calls her manager and says, hey, do you mind picking me up? She normally takes the bus to work, and the boss gives her a ride, and they go and pick up some coffee. But they don't park in the Maxim's parking lot. Maxim's is the beauty salon. There's no beauty salon. The beauty salon doesn't have parking because they're on the second floor of the department store in what was downtown Champaign in 1966. So where they park is in a lot which is actually separated from the department store by another store, Rogar's, which I think is still there. It's a lower cost furniture store. And that's where the injury occurs. And in this case, you know, I think it's actually relatively clear looking back. Compensation should be denied. It's not the employer provided parking. This is a department store parking, and the employers in the department store, they don't have any subcontract or lease to provide parking for their employees. It's actually quite a bit separated from the mall. And they weren't even really parking there. They weren't parking there for the day. They were just stopping because it was raining, and they had some coffees and some supplies they needed to run the building. So the Supreme Court rejects compensation. So this one, I think, draws a nice line between De Hoyos, which tells us what is covered, employer parking lot, and tells us what's not. We're not going to extend this to a non-employer's parking lot that's kind of sort of related to the employer. The next case, 2 years later, was Hiram Walker, and that is was a distillery in Peoria. And the petitioner in this case, Mr. I pronounce his last name, Elmer, he was a guy who starts at 7 o'clock, but every morning he gets to work at 6:10 or 6:20. And some days he stays punch in. I've represented a lot of clients like this. They get to work very, very early. They hang out. They get ready for the day. It's just sort of a routine. And on this day of March 23rd, 1965, he gets to work about 6 o'clock. And there's some dispute as to where he goes. There was a cafe called Elsie's, which is sort of adjacent to the Hiram Walker distillery. And it kind of looks like he's walking in the direction of the distillery, but it's not exactly clear where. But he does fall and he does suffer. And most of these cases, I tried to focus these cases on the snow and ice cases. There's some that are a little different with the capital case. And there's about 200 appellate and Supreme Court cases that sort of fall within the parking lot, sort of parking lot type cases. So I narrowed it down. Today, so we're really focused on snow and ice. And in this case, the Supreme Court finds it compensable. And what they say is it doesn't really matter whether he was going to Elsie's or whether he was going directly into the plant. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, supposed to start at 7. This is his custom, his employer knows about it. And even if he had gone to Elsie's and had a cup of coffee or pancakes and then gone into work, it wouldn't have made a difference because the lot is going to be in the same shape within the next hour. This case, I think, if this same case came before the commission now, I think we'd be inclined not to find this one. The commission would be inclined not to find this one compensable. I think they find this a deviation, which they actually do in the next case. And we'll get there in a second. So the Walker Court gives the same analysis, saying, you know, this is a parking lot provided by the employer because they're at a reasonable time. They talk about what I mentioned before, this idea that the parking lot is there not as a fringe benefit for the employees. It's not a benevolent act on behalf of Hiram Walker. This is sort of the functioning of their business. The next case is the Aaron case from 1974. In this case, the facts, I think, are almost identical to the Hiram Walker case. So in this case, Virginia Aaron, she works for a laundry company. And I think it wasn't exactly clear from the facts of the case. It looks like they're doing some things off premises and they come back and it's not perfectly clear. But at 3:30 p.m. on January 14th of 1971, she picks up some cleaning from her employer's premises. And she says she goes to the parking lot. Two other employees said, no, that's actually not exactly what happened. We all went to a tavern and had some drinks, and then we went to the car which was in the employer parking lot. And the Supreme Court denies compensation, saying that there's a deviation. So I guess if you were juxtaposing this case to Hiram Walker, you'd say in Hiram Walker, the petitioner in that case never left the plant parking lot. He may have been going in the direction of the cafe, but he was still on the plant parking lot. Although in that case they say it wouldn't matter if he had left. In this case they say it's a deviation, this break they took where they had a few drinks. This case is also a little bit different because there is a manifest weight case where the commission denied liability and the court doesn't really get into the analysis as much as they could. And they just say, well, they don't really explain why, but they just say, well, Hiram Walker is substantially different. And I disagree. I think that the facts of those two cases are generally the same because in this case, Ms. Gardner, or Ms. Aaron, whether she left the employer parking lot and had a few drinks and then came back and we still arguing, the lot is still icy and nothing's changed about the lot. And her co-employees said they had drinks for 2 hours. But that one is as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, a deviation. The Rogers case from 1983, I don't think I've ever seen cited. I kind of stumbled across it. Supreme Court case. It's not directly on point. It's kind of a fun case. And this is a gentleman who leaves work he gets off work, he punches out at 3:35, and he goes to the parking lot. His wife is supposed to pick him up, and then she hits him with the car. And it was later determined that the car malfunctioned. My suspicion is that Mr. Rogers was walking out the plant with a female employee, but I can't prove it. But the reason why this case is important is, again, this is a big dividing line where we say there was nothing about the employer that caused Mr. Rogers' injuries. Like, hit him with the car, they're saying there's some type of malfunction in the car, lurched forward, which he described as like 100 automobile engines coming at him. And, there's some other cases I didn't cite where there was issues in the parking lot where people would come in and create unsafe conditions for employees coming and leaving parking, and they got into a car accident. In that case, the commissioner, CCD Health, did find commendable. But that would then go to hazard, which we typically talk here about snow and ice. In this case, there's no hazard otherwise, but for the issue with the car was his wife's disdain for him. She would have picked him up and they would have gone home and there would have been no accident. So there's no issue here with the parking lot that provides any connection with what the accident. The Caterpillar case, everybody is familiar with, and it's not exactly a parking lot case. It doesn't involve snow and ice. So the parking lot case, in 1989, I think this was in Victoria plant. Mr. Price was walking from the plant to the parking lot, and he steps on a curb and injures his ankle. What's that? And he injures his ankle. So the question was whether this was a hazard. And the Supreme Court says it was not, because there was no hazard with the curb. It was just a regular curb, and if you view the case, they can talk about the dimensions of the curb. I imagine when municipalities are building curbs, there probably is a standard size for them. It's just a curb. There's no defect in the curb. The one thing that the Supreme Court did say in Caterpillar was that if there had been a defect or a hazard, if this curb was not a standard curb, he might have a case. So if it was a situation where the concrete was eroding or there was a crack in it and he would not have seen his foot was caught, this case might be compensable. Just a regular curb, not compensable, and that fits with, I think, with the laws generally been consistent. There's no hazard there.
That was my case.
Okay.
I represented the petitioner.
Okay.
I parked in a Caterpillar parking lot in downtown Peoria, and he was walking on a city street, and he fell on a curb of the city street. that fact always seems to get forgotten. It's only a curb. It's more than that, it's a city street curb.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name, sir.
Andy Marzell.
Okay. Well, thank you. So if everyone didn't hear, this was Andy's case, and he represented the petitioner. And what you're saying is that the fact that's excluded, that I neglected to mention, is that it was a city curb?
It was a city curb. He was on a direct route from the Caterpillar parking lot to the Caterpillar office building, back in the days when Caterpillar had a huge middle management staff.
And why do you think that is an important fact?
Because it was a city street.
Okay.
It wasn't anything under the control of the employer.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. And thank you. In turning to the Walmart case, this is the case that I think has created the most confusion. And I don't think that this is good case law. So I encourage everybody to read the Morris Harvey case, which we'll get to. It came out 3 years later, also from the Illinois Appellate Court. And if you disagree with me, please let me know. I think I put my, everyone's trying to reach Dave. I think my email's on the handout. My interpretation is that this case is not good because Morris Harvey distinguishes it, and it's because of the common law. This is a more subsequent case. I don't think this is good case law, but it's still cited. So in the Walmart case in 2001, this was in, I believe, Decatur. Heather Perry works from 4:30 p.m. until 11 p.m. And she takes a break at 8:30 p.m. And there was a particular area of the lot where the employees were encouraged to park. She doesn't park there because she didn't drive to work that day. If you remember in the Hoyos case, they talked about whether the employees customarily park in the parking lot. She didn't park in there. It was also raised in the Maxim case. She's meeting a roommate, and I think they were going to go and get food. That wasn't entirely clear from the record. But she's not going to her car. She's going to a roommate who's waiting for her in the roommate's car when she slips and suffers the injury. And again, this is now where this confusion of is it a employer parking lot and increased risk, or is it just an employer parking lot or increased risk? So the appellate court denies compensability, and they say parking lot is open to the customers of Walmart and the employees. They also go on to say that the roommate was not an employee, and I don't think that's terribly significant in my interpretation, but I do think it is important that Ms. Perry wasn't parking in the lot. That does distinguish from the other cases. The line of hazard at which Ms. Perry and the general public were equally exposed, I don't believe that's good law, and I actually don't agree with that. In the Morris Harvey case, they can tell us that doesn't matter. And then they go on to cite the Caterpillar case, talking about what they're trying to do here, trying to identify the distinctive characteristics of the employment when we're establishing whether something. So the Morris Harvey case is an appellate court case from 3 years later. I read the case again last night, and I think this is the best case for the law on the parking lot injuries, because it addresses everything. It talks about increased risk, it talks about Caterpillar, it talks about the prior case in Walmart, and even though it's not a Supreme Court case, it does give a very clear recitation of the law, and a lot of the disputes that we have at the commission, we're talking about fighting over compensability, I think it is very clear on. So this is a case that I think we saw cited a lot more a few years ago, but it's not cited as much. But this is the case. If there's one case that you were going to look at to decide what is and what is not compensable, it's Morris Harvey. So the facts of Morris Harvey. It was a Bob Evans restaurant in, I think, Joliet, and Miss Janet Morris Harvey is a server, and they're told to park on the side of the restaurant or behind the restaurant to allow the customers to park closer to the front. So again, this is a case kind of like the Walmart case, where now we're starting to get into where the employee is directed to park if we have a parking lot that's really open to the general public. Which again, I actually don't think, and we'll see, is as important a factor as we've made it. And the Morris Harvey court walks back Walmart, and they start going over the law. And they talk about, of course, that this is a parking lot provided provided by the employer to the employee, that recovery is permitted. And then they go and talk about the second prong, which is not an and prong, it's an or prong, where we talk about if the employee is exposed to a risk common to the general public to a greater degree than other persons. So that's one where, we spend all this time talking about increased risk, and that's a big part of the commission's decision is Sheriff Smith. But what does the Morris Hardy Court? They say whether the parking lot is used primarily by employees or the general public, the proper inquiry is whether the employer maintains and provides the lot for the employee's use. If this is the case, then the lot constitutes the employee's premises, and the presence of a hazardous condition on the employer's premises that causes a claimant's injury supports a finding of a compensable case. So I read that as to say that it doesn't matter if the public is also using that lot. So you've got a Bob Evans restaurant, you have the employees and customers coming in, same thing with customers. It doesn't matter. And then they also, this line at the end is something that the Sheriff Smith, the appellate court addresses in Rule 23, where they're basically saying, although the Sheriff Smith goes a little bit further, once you have that hazard, you don't even need to talk about increased risk. The hazard is the snow and ice, which the Hoyos court has told us is part of this point. The Morris Hardy case also cites Larson, and they also walk back Walmart with this sort of peculiar argument where they're saying, well, it was her roommate was there, she's not really under the control of her employment, she's going to leave her roommate. And I think what they really should have done was just explicitly overruled Walmart. But they make this distinction, and I don't really understand it. If you're going to your car or you're going to your roommate's car, or whether your roommate or your friend or your family, you share a car with. I'm not sure I fully understand the importance of that. But that is the case. I think that's the case. Everyone should be familiar with that. That's the controlling case law. I think that case gives you the best analysis of all the other cases of increased risk. That's the case I think we really should be looking at it. It's still good law. I don't think it's been distinguished by any other cases, certainly. The Souter case, the Supreme Court case, the appellate court case from 2000, Supreme Court case from 2013. Sorry, appellate court case. And this one was a little bit curious because the petitioner, Mary Souter, doesn't work for the Illinois Department of Insurance. She's hired by a temp agency. And she's loaned to the Illinois Department of Insurance. On her first day of work, she shows up and she says, is there parking? And they say, well, go talk to this guy who's in charge of the building. The building is leased by the state of Illinois. And he gives her a parking space. And the state of Illinois' argument is, we didn't give her a parking space. It's the building manager who gave her a parking space. She doesn't even work for the state of Illinois. She works for a subcontractor. And on February 10, 9 years ago, she slips and suffers an injury. And the appellate court says this is compensable. And so they start, obviously, she's a borrowed employee, so the state is equally responsible. And they go on to say that the state furnishes employees with parking through the state's lease agreement, which is also true, and I should have mentioned that. So in this building that the state leases, they do have parking for the state employees. So even though she's one step removed as a loaned employee, as a subcontractor, as manpower, when she's working with the state of Illinois as a borrowed employee, the state of Illinois has a set of parking spaces for their employees. She's given that parking space. They're providing parking for employees, and she's an employee, so she's covered. So if you change the facts a little bit, she's not a subcontractor for manpower. I don't think that there's any dispute that she's an employee. Then the only issue where it gets a little bit sticky is because it wasn't anybody from the direct employer who told her to park her there. Who told her to park in that particular spot, is this manager of the building. But But the counter to that is all the employees are partners together. So, everyone who works in this building is from a different department of the state of Illinois. They lease this building, they don't own it, and this is who you go to for everything, including counter. So it's a little bit of a peculiar fact pattern, but I think it's still consistent with the Hoyos and with it here in Walker, and still falls within employer-provided parking, defect on that part, and I think in this case it's ice, it's always ice, so it's compensable. Then we get to Barbara Dukic, which is a case we've talked about a lot. And this is not exactly a parking lot case because she was leaving Fenton High School, and I think my understanding of the facts was there was a ramp that was for wheelchairs to wheel something into the school. It's still on the property, but she's going to the parking lot where she parked. And she suffers very serious injuries. And the appellate court says, no. They say this is not compensable, and they come up with a sort of curious idea to me that, well, we don't have any case law that says that anybody who falls on a paved surface, concrete, I think is their language, is at an increased risk from the general public. So they're saying wet concrete that's slippery is not a hazard. So we change the facts a little bit. If Ms. Dukic is in the employer parking lot, she slips on ice, I think they're going to say clearly compensable. If she's on this ramp and she slips on ice, again, I think clearly this is not even an extension of the employer park. She's on the employer's property just outside of the school, still compensable. But once that ice is no longer in a solid form, and the molecules contract in water, it is now no longer compensable. And one of the reasons I strongly disagree with the appellate court's analysis in this case is I don't think it is for them to reach the decision that ice is a hazard and water isn't. I think that there's, and we'll get into the science, I think that the science needs to be established there. But I would also submit that if a concrete ramp outside of school is slippery, we know it's slippery because she slipped, then that's a hazard because it's not supposed to be slippery. And I don't think anybody is disputing that water makes surfaces, gives you less traction, it makes them more slippery, more prone to injury. But in this case, that's what they say. So wet paved surface is not a hazard and not compensable. And then equally puzzling to me is where they start talking about this increased risk from the general public, which they will later say is not a factor. But it's also, I think they're using the wrong analysis. Because in all the cases that we've talked about, the Hoyos where the compensability was found by the Supreme Court, if you go 10 feet off the employer's property, you're going to have snow and ice. So by their logic, you don't have increased risk in the employer's parking lot in any event. So what they inarticulately said was, number one, you don't have a hazard. So even though it's the employer's premises, it's not compensable. And number two, you don't have increased risk. And I can't stress enough how much I think that this is. Yes?
Was there any analysis done on did the employee elect to take a more dangerous method of ingress or egress because there was a ramp that was wet? Was there a flat surface that the person could have exited the building?
Dave, that was your case. So the question was the employer, are you saying the employer was this a dangerous?
Well, there are cases, like if there are cases where ingress and egress, for instance, they may climb down a snowy ramp to get their parking lot, supposed to use the walkway, and they fall on the snowy grass, that may not be compensable. They elected a more dangerous route.
The employee likes more dangerous route?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, in this case...
There was never any information about whether she had an alternative route.
Okay.
But what was clear was that this ramp was the employer's premises. It was the employer's premises. It was, in fact, the in the course of part of this case was stipulated to by the respondent. The respondent stipulated that Ms. Dukic was in the course of her employment when she slipped on the ramp. Well, but I know you wouldn't have, but it was.
You have 2 years.
Oh, only kidding.
All right, thank you.
But to your question, you know, I would submit to you, does it make a difference? So if you're a teacher, or I think she might not have been a teacher, I think she was an aide in school, and you're leaving the school and you're going to your car, does it matter whether you go out in front, or whether you go to the library, you go out the gym door? You know, if it's icy and slippery and you elect to take, you know, slide down a ramp, of course, you know, maybe you're taking yourself out of the mediation there. But for whatever reason, she elected to take the handicap ramp. I would submit that I don't think that plays into the analysis. I don't think that she should be penalized for taking a ramp rather than stairs. So if she'd taken the stairs and she'd slipped on water on the stairs, it would then be compensable. So, you know, but that's the law. And what's interesting, I'll talk about a little bit later, is during the oral arguments on the Sheriff Smith case, both the plaintiff's lawyer and the respondent's lawyer raised Dukich, and the appellate court didn't want to talk about it at all, which was their case from a year and a half before.
And just to acknowledge what Scott's talking about, right? I mean, we've talked about the cases here in these programs, right? This idea of an alternative route, right? Remember we talked about that case where, I forget the name of the case, but we've talked about it here. Person falls down the stairs, and the commission said, well, they could have taken the elevator, right? So I strongly disagree with this alternative route theory, but it's out there, Scott, like you're talking about, right? This alternative route theory is out there. So Scott brings up a good point, unfortunately.
So here, I just sort of lay out where I think, you know, we've got the case law from Morse Hardie, the most recent one, where they're saying part of the employer's premises, liability attaches. And the employer is going back to 1962, saying it's your employer, that's the employer in the parking lot, that's really by the employer is responsible. And then the court Dukich saying, interestingly, that there's no published cases that boldly suggest an outdoor paved surface, wet from rainfall, constitutes a hazardous condition, absent ice, snow, or some other defect or hazard. So I suppose that what they're saying is, well, you know, we'll get into it. So this is kind of, I'm not being silly when I talk about why is ice and why is water slippery. It's kind of an interesting question. This is the same substance, it's just a different temperature. As everybody knows, water is one of the only liquids that expands when it gets to its freezing temperature, which is why, you know, unfortunately sometimes our pipes burst. And there is some dispute, and people think of science as a set of facts. Science is not fact. Science is a process. And there's some dispute among the scientific community as to why ice is slippery. It's something I did not really thought of until the Dukich case. So I did a little bit of research, and the long-standing theory was that when you step on ice, the pressure from your foot creates the ice to melt. So you have a thin layer of water, same water that was on the ramp that Ms. Dukich slipped on, and that's slippery because you've got the hard surface of the ice with water. The second theory is that the pressure creates friction, and that warms up the ice and sort of melts it, and that's the same thing with this thin layer of water above the ice. And these two brothers I think they were in either Germany or Denmark, just published a paper in the Journal of Chemical Physics. And again, this is a theory, this is not a fact, but what they're saying is that no, that's not it at all. They're saying that on the surface of ice, there are some free molecules. They're tumbling and sort of moving along at a microscopic level. And that's what makes ice slippery. And it's still a theory, and I'm sure somebody will refute this. But the idea is, I think with the exception of Nisha and Daniel Bond, the conventional wisdom is that ice is slippery because there's a thin layer of water on a very hard surface. It's the same as if we dump water here on this linoleum, it would be very slippery. So that, again, is one of my criticisms of the Dukich case. I don't think it makes any difference. We're still talking about water or ice, and The science up until recently was just saying it was water. And so you put water on the surface. I think we all agree that water on concrete is going to be less slippery than water on linoleum or water on tiles. But it's still going to be slippery. Oh, sorry, I don't know how to go back, but that's okay. So the last case is the Sheriff Smith case. And we talked about that case a lot. And that was a case in Will County, and Ms. Smith worked for the Manhattan Park District. This parking lot, I think she sort of says is more just for employees. There's a couple parking lots at this, sort of like the recreational center. And there's one more for employees. She parks the one more for customers and patrons. She uses the lot that is closest for employees, or employees who use it, say, icy, snowy day. And there's some dispute as to whether salt was laid down, and I think one of the employees, the supervisor, is saying, well, at least it was, we plowed it earlier in the day. But there really isn't any question that this is, the employer owns this parking lot. They are maintaining it in some capacities. They're certainly controlling it. They definitely maintaining it because they're icing it and they're plowing it. And I think she's leaving work in the afternoon. She slips on ice and suffers injuries. And I believe the arbitrator found this case compensable, and the commission did not. And with all due respect to the commission that we practiced before, this is a case where I very much disagree with their analysis. And the reason I disagree with their analysis is because they didn't cite any parking lot cases. So we have 59 years of cases, we have Supreme Court cases, we have cases directly on point. We even have cases that could have been used to say that this was not compensable, and that's where they want to go, but they didn't do that. And then they threw in natural accumulation, which is a common law liability, and then there's actually statutes on that as well. But it's making me think of more personal injury is not a factor in workers' compensation. And they also start talking about risk to the general public, which we know in the Lord Harvey case is no longer applicable. This case went up, and we had a Rule 23 issued about a month and a half ago. And I know that Rule 23 says that I can't cite this case. They don't say what the punishment is if I do cite it. But if nothing else, it will give us as lawyers and the commission telling us what how the appellate court sees these cases and how they will rule if another one of these cases comes up. So they quote Lord Harvey. It doesn't matter if the employer, is open to the public, if it's the employer's parking lot, and they maintain it for its employees, it's compensable. And then they say, Lord Harvey does say, the presence of a hazardous condition on the employer's premises that causes a claimant's injury supports a finding of a compensable claim. But then they go further. And they say the hazardous condition on the employer's premises renders the risk of the injury incidental to employment without having to prove that she was exposed to the risk of hazard to a greater extent than members of the general public. And they never said specifically that before, which is why I think there shouldn't be a Rule 23, but the motion to publish was denied. Up until now, there's always been a two-pronged analysis. If it's the employer's parking lot and there's a hazard on it, that could be compensable, or you can establish compensability by increased risk. There's some other cases of people who are in the parking lot carrying things to their employer. But here, I think that I wouldn't call this bright line, but they've gone a step further. And they've said, talking about risk to the general public doesn't matter as long as you have that hazard, which we know from the appellate court's decision the year before, is that has to be snow or ice. It can't be water. And my quarrel with the appellate court on this one is, if you're going to clarify the law and take it, I think, a little bit further, it would be beneficial if that was a decision we could cite. But interestingly, you're also ignoring the Supreme Court's analysis in 1962, where they just say an employee who falls on a parking lot provided by his employer while continuing to work, we believe, is subject to hazards to which the general public is not exposed. And there was no conversation in De Hoyos as to whether that parking lot was open. So in the beginning, I think what they were saying was the increased risk was just the employer parking lot, and it's compensable because it's an employer parking lot, hence diverged into this sort of, not a two-pronged test, but a two-part test, where you only have to meet one of the two parts. But that, my quarrel with the appellate court is, you know, if you're going to make what I think is a clarification of the law, and you're going to tell us, give us something we can cite. And you might also point out the ruling from the Supreme Court was a little bit different from what you're saying. So that's, yes,
On this share case,
yes,
the petitioner testified she was told where to park,
yes,
but the commission found that there was no evidence to establish that.
yes.
So what's the discrepancy there?
The discrepancy there is that what the commission is saying is, you know, evidence can come in a number of forms. It can come from testimony, it can come from medical evidence, it can come from surveillance. They're wrong. She gave evidence. They may have found that evidence not to be credible.
But the commission found that she was not directed to park there.
Right.
So then the case isn't compensable, right?
No. Well, no,
So
no.
then she's exposed to the same risk as the general public.
Well, no, because then, no, weren't you listening? Because of Moore's Harvey and the radio. So I want to answer both of the questions. I think the commission was wrong when they said there was no evidence of where she was directed to park.
Disregard that point. The commission found that she was not told where to park.
Right? So, right, I missed last thing.
So she was told not, she was not told where to park according to the commission.
Sure.
That's what we have to go with.
Sure. It
That's
doesn't
what
matter.
the appellate court has to go with.
Sure, but they can't say there was no evidence. That I think is a mistake. There's no evidence. Well, that was her testimony with some evidence. They found it not credible. But the bigger picture is it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter whether they told her to park there. She's in an employer parking lot, and that's why I think the appellate court reached the decision they did. So again, what I was trying to explain today was that this issue of whether an employer tells you got to park behind the lot, or you got to park on the left side of the lot, or you don't know anything. Once they provide the parking, it's compensable. So that this analysis of, well, did they tell you to park in the lot, doesn't matter, and that's specifically what I think that the Moore's Harvey court says, and what the Sheriff Smith decision says.
And Patrick Jesse is here. He was the, hi Patrick, it was his case in the appellate court. And Patrick, am I right to say that in the Sheriff Smith case, the employer owned the parking lot, right? The employer owned the parking lot in the Sheriff Smith case.
If I recall, it was their property, but the problem is this, is if we're gonna say that snow, and this is what I argue, snow that falls from the sky, is paved in black, saying that's rainwater, nukage. One's compensable, the other isn't. I think that's a serious discrepancy between these cases. Part of the reason why Sheriff Smith was in Rule 23 was, I believe, the appellate court did not want to reverse Walmart and decided to bury it under Rule 23.
Did they address Walmart?
Yeah.
I still think Sheriff Smith was wrongly decided, and I still think neutral risk should apply in these instances. And that's my position, maybe it's because I'm on a different side.
John's going to talk a little bit about how they distinguish Walmart.
Right. So, and this is a situation where, actually, you and I would respectfully disagree, and I was at, there at the appellate court when we did, I thought very good arguments on behalf of your client. But I don't think Walmart is good law. I think if you read Moore's Harvey, they're saying it's not good law. And I don't think you can ever read the Walmart case in isolation without reading a case that specifically addresses it and says, hang on, that's not what we were saying. So a lot of times I think we are citing Walmart without citing the case from 3 years later that directly addressed it and said, hey, I think you're not reading Walmart correctly. So that's respectfully my response.
Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the appellate court make some distinction between it being her car and her friend's car
Yeah,
through
you want to call
Walmart?
that a distinction.
Well, but I mean, that's what, weren't you asked that question specifically?
Yeah, Justice Hoffman, who was actually the majority on the Walmart decision, which denied him compensability, was the one who brought up the fact that she was going in a friend's car. To me, she's on premises, she falls on ice, that was denied. I don't see why it matters whose car she was going to or not. So I think personally, I think this new rule that they're coming up with, or logic, is dangerously close to positional risk. I'm sure people will disagree with that, but that's my position. Ted also has a question.
Well, no, and that's my question. It deals with positional risk in light of the two recent Rule 23 cases. And now we have, if you're the owner of a property, you're an employer, and there's snow on it, it's a hazard. And then we look at the law on positional risk, which is not just that you're on the premises or you're at work. You have to show more than that. But according to the parking lot cases, it has nothing to do with work, by the way. I mean, walking into work is not a job function. It's not unique to the employment, which is the standard under the law. But now, if you're on the premises and you're walking in and it's snowing out, that's a hazard of the employment. How do you score that up with positional risk and the fact that Illinois has rejected that?
Because the hazard is on the employer's property. And so,
But it's a hazard faced by everyone.
I know, but again,
So what's
I
the
go back to
distinction?
common
You're
law.
basically saying arising out of, or I'm sorry, in the course of is sufficient.
I'm not saying that the Supreme Court of Illinois is saying not quite that, but
No, that is exactly, you are absolutely eliminating arising out under this analysis.
I'm citing
You-
the case line.
You and I talked about this the other day. I think it's sort of implicit in these employer premises cases where they're talking about the fact that the mere fact that it's the employer's premises and that there's a hazard. If you are an employee, I think there's something implicit in that you are always exposed to a greater risk as an employee. In other words, you're there every day. The public is not there. It's the parking lot that you park in every day. I mean, they don't go so far as to say that.
So, Sean, but you're getting back into that neutral risk analysis, right? And now you're talking about the quantitative enhancement of the neutral risk, right? What they're telling us in Sheriff Smith is that a hazard on the employer's premises is an employment risk.
Right.
It's not a neutral risk.
I was
It
just
doesn't
addressing
matter,
what Greg
it
said
doesn't matter
earlier.
if the majority of the people on those premises are the general public. If it's a hazard on the employer's premises, it's an employment risk. And with all due respect, the difference in the positional risk cases, right, the Brady case, that was the case that rejected the positional risk, is that that was not an employment hazard. It was a truck from a third party coming off of the highway a quarter of a mile away and crashing through the wall of the premises. It wasn't a hazard. It wasn't a hazard on the employer's premises. It was a truck from up the highway. So
It's snow in the sky.
but let me just say this, right? It isn't the snowflake that hurt Sheriff Smith, right? It wasn't the snowflake that hit her on the head like the truck that hit Mr. Brady, right? It was the condition of the employer's premises. And I get the fact
When you walked
that
out
I
your car
get the
this morning,
fact
did
that
you
the
sweat?
I get the fact that the employer can't do anything about that, right? There's nothing that the employer can do about that. But since when is fault a concept in workers' compensation, right?
But under that analysis, though, if in fact that building, if there was evidence put in that that building was too close to the roadway and that there were a lot of trucks coming in to the plant, you could make the argument there was an increased risk of the truck.
I disagree with you because that would be a neutral risk analysis, right? But that would be a neutral risk analysis, right? Because we know that's not an employment risk, that would be a neutral risk analysis, and you're doing the qualitative part of it, right? You're doing the qualitative part of the enhancement of the neutral risk analysis. And you may or may not agree with that.
Here's the problem we run into. Let's assume now that the employers, because now they're being looked at as property owners and whether they're actually exercising reasonable care. Let's say that they go out rather than once a day to shovel the snow, that they're out there and they're shoveling and they're de-icing, and there's still snowing, and there's an accumulation, they've done everything, and someone still slips and falls. But under the recent cases, because it's ice and snow, it's competitive.
They've done everything to make that machine as safe as possible. If the guy's arm gets ripped off of the machine, it doesn't matter. It's still a workers' compensation case. The employer's conduct, when it's an employment risk, doesn't matter, right? We can all agree on that.
But the thing is, snow is not an employment risk, ice is not.
The condition of the employer's premises is the employment risk, not the snowflake hitting her in the head.
And is it greater than you face walking out of your driveway? No.
It doesn't matter if it's an employment risk. You're talking about a neutral risk. Thanks, everybody.